everybody, and welcome to another Top 10 edition of Magic Mics, proudly sponsored by our Patreon supporters and CoolStuffInc.com. You can find cool stuff in stock every day, and check out our co-sponsor CardHoarder.com, offering the best inventory prices and delivery of cards for Magic Online. And finally, check out our new Altar Sleeves. Get your custom sleeve image of the Magic Mics crew at altarsleeves.com/magicmics. I'm Evan Irwin, and we get started each week by saying hello to my two co-hosts, Aaron Campbell.
Happy not Mother's Day, everybody.
That's right.
She solved the puzzle. Ruben Bressler.
It's coming up, though, so word to your mother.
Wow. Fair enough. Well, look, we also begin with our choice of the top comment from last week in a segment we call Honorable Mention, where Ruben will tell us who was the most eloquent in letting us know what card we did not choose as one of our top 10 card draw cards, or card draw spells. Ruben?
Obviously there's a ton of great options, but Third Degree Top Gun asks the question, are you going to pay the one?
Pay the one?
The answer that should be given is yes, but in reality, most of the time, it's no. Rustic Study is my honorable mention, and I think I've already said enough. Now, I did pick this because it's a great response, but I also picked this because of a response to this response from one Miss Erin Campbell, who said that she never pays the one.
I sure don't.
And my question for you is, do you just like to hemorrhage value? What are you doing?
So it's funny because when I first started dating my boyfriend, this came up because he always pays the one. And we'd had spirited discussions about this. And I believe that in every relationship, they say like, so which one of you pays the one and which one doesn't? I don't, just because I assume that what I'm doing is so much more powerful that I don't care what kind of crap. Kind of like the Nessie and Boar situation. Remember our amazing preview card where people would say, oh, it's a 10-5. But they have to draw cards. And it's like, yeah, but these are sealed cards. And so you're probably drawing Garbo. Right. And so we're just getting in with a 10-5 every turn. And so it's the Nessie and Boar approach where you're going, it's cute that you're drawing cards, but I'm still doing way more powerful things. And so I just don't care. It's a flex. You're just like...
It's like Demonic Tutor in Limited is like, who cares? You're searching your library for your best 5/5 for 5. Like, I don't care about that. But in Vintage, obviously, Demonic Tutor is very scary. Mm-hmm. That makes sense. But also, it's like...
This is...
Why? You have so much mana in Commander.
You do have a lot of mana in Commander. Now, first of all, this is a $40 common from Prophecy. Yep. That's insane. Rustic Study, for those who don't know, is a blue and 2 generic mana enchantment that says whenever an opponent casts a spell, you may draw a card unless that player pays 1 generic mana. So, pay the 1.
Rustic was actually a big ability in that set. You had Rustic Tutor, Rustic Caves. You had a bunch of Rustic cards.
Oh, yeah.
This is the only one that mattered, eventually. And it was a terrible ability that had 1 hit.
Because, much like the Punisher mechanic, which was kind of sort of around, mimicked in many ways, it was you let your opponent make the choice. And that always sucks unless you're in a multiplayer game where everyone's playing a bunch of spells and you can draw a bunch of cards off of it.
And we all know the Rustic Study person that's like paying the one. God damn it, I'm not paying the one. Stop asking me. And the Rustic Study guy in my play group was a guy named Peter, and Inked Playmats actually had a playmat that is just like the Star Wars scroll of like, do you want to pay the one? Do you want to pay the one? And we got it for him for Christmas.
Amazing.
Nice. Well, congratulations to Third Degree Top Gun. Please contact us on social media for your prize. Thanks again to CoolStuffInc.com for sponsoring this giveaway, and stay tuned for our top 10 list this week, and maybe you can win next week's free gift certificate. Because it's time to talk about Svetlin Velinov, who is a hell of a Magic artist, has over 300 cards, so there was lots of options to choose from, and that was all very sweet. But let's go ahead and get started here. Ruben, what's number 10?
My number 10 is a card. So the first thing I want to say is that I was going through Svetlin's cards, and I was like, I kind of like this, I kind of like this, and then I literally got to one of the letters in the alphabet and was like, I could just do a top 10 of Svetlin Velinov cards that begin with the letter T. I don't know how it happened. It was a very weird coincidence. But cards 10 through 6 and my number 2 are all cards that begin with the letter T.
Nice.
So top 10 T. Velinov.
Spill that T.
What's the T with Ruben Bressler?
Right? Yeah. And my number 10... that starts with the letter T, is one of these cards. Now, something I've noticed about Svetlin as I was going through this list is his detail is so unique. I feel like I look at a Magic card by Svetlin Velinov and I'm like, okay, that's really good art. I look at the zoomed in version that's on his website and I get a totally different experience. Mm-hmm. More so than most artists. He and Richard Kane Ferguson are the two that are like, wow, I missed so much by not getting a 10x zoom of this card. And my number 10 is no different. It's Thundermaw Hellkite.
Nice.
Thundermaw Hellkite is 3 colorless red for a 5/5 dragon with flying and haste. When Thundermaw Hellkite enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to each creature with flying your opponent's control. Tap those creatures. Obviously, it's a tournament all-star. It was designed to take out Lingering Souls and to tap down Angel of Serenity. But let's talk about this art for a second. If you go to Svetlin's site, you can see the detail and the lighting, and that there's a light source coming from deep inside of the maw of this dragon. It's really difficult to try to get a light source off screen but inside of something. And for him to be able to pull this off, not to mention the detail that's in the background of this piece, jumping off of a crag, the lightning bolt, everything about this card is so evocative.
And for its time, I mean, to get a 5-mana 5/5 flying haste creature, if it literally did nothing else, we would have been like, whoa, that's crazy. But like, it has evasion, it kills all those stupid tokens that were running the format, and it taps down any Angel, Baneslayer, or no. Actually, not Baneslayer because of its ability.
Well, yeah, it
but
does not top down Baneslayer.
But any other Angel hangs around, Lyra, whatever, get out of here. Card's great.
Well, then they upped the ante by giving us Stormbreath Dragon. Like, for a while there, we had, good 5-drop dragons in Standard, and that was cool.
Glorybringer. I mean, we have the Treasure Dragon right now.
Goldspan.
Goldspan. And Thundermaw was really the first of those, really good flying haste 5-mana dragons.
I think Glorybringer's 4, though.
It's a 4/4 for 5.
Is it 5? Okay.
Yep, 5 mana.
But it's like a mana doubler, so that card's ridiculous, and that card's crazy. Woo, Aaron, what's number 10?
So, Ruben, you mentioned missing things in Svetlin's art, and this is art that is like an optical illusion to me. I have to zoom in because if I look at it from far away, I see something completely different. My number 10 is Ballon Wandering Knight. So Ballon is 2 colorless and 2 white, legendary creature Cat Knight. It's only been printed once in Commander 2017. It's about a $9 card, 3 power, 3 toughness with first strike. Ballon has double strike as long as 2 or more equipment are attached to it. You can also pay a colorless and a white to attach all equipment to Ballon. But when I look at this far away, I think it's somebody with a pumpkin on their head. I'm like, is that a pumpkin hat? I don't understand what's going on here. And only when you zoom into it do you realize it is an orange cat person that simply has their head turned. But I can't tell you, even when I was working on this on my laptop, and I was laying on my couch, and I had it kind of like resting on my stomach. And I was like, oh, there's Pumpkinhead. And I had to like put the laptop in my face. And I'm like, nope, there's a profile there. Like, it's a dude. We're good.
And again, blown up, it looks really cool, and there's little light shimmers on everything, and some of it just gets really lost when they shrink it.
Each individual blade of grass, each individual wisp of cloud, each individual rock sticking up. There's some flowers in this piece. It's so detailed, and you lose so much of it in the smaller versions.
Yeah. So for my number 10 here, this was a piece that, again, for these top 10s in particular, I try my best to not look at sort of rarities and sort by how expensive they are or whatever, just kind of what goes through, what hits you, what kind of jumps out at you. And this one I felt jumped out in that it shows a lot of kind of the humanity of I guess you'd say the humanity of the tree folk that it's showing you here. But it's the idea that you're protecting all of these animals from something bad, and all these animals are next to you and snuggling to you because like this fire is raining down on you in Warden of the Woods. Warden of the Woods is 2 green, 4 generic mana for an uncommon 5/7 tree folk with vigilance. And whenever it becomes the target of a spell or an ability an opponent controls, you may draw 2 cards. This was a pretty sweet M21 card for the top of your green curve. But it's also a really terrific image of, the tree folk are protecting these little animals. And I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah. From the anger of the gods bits that are falling from the sky, protecting a little bear cub or 2. There's a rabbit in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And look at his mustache. Oh, what a cute mustache. And something that I really appreciate about Svetlin is he is really able to capture light sources. And the eyes of the Warden
was huge.
are a great piece.
Yep, that was one that really jumped out at me. So that was really sweet. Let's go on here to number 9. Ruben, what you got?
My number 9 is a tournament level card, but it's a land, and so sometimes you get overlooked, especially if you're part of a cycle. But I really stuck with this because Temple of Enlightenment became a key piece of art, and I'll send you the link that I have to the bigger version of this. to describing Meletis in the Mythic Odysseys of Theros. The movement, the energy, the excitement that you get from Temple of Enlightenment. This is a bustling port entry to this vast, massive Athenian-style city. You have fishermen unloading goods. You have someone repairing a net. You have the buildings in the background. You've got your birds. You've got your boats. You've got your temple. Everything is happening, and it's all happening at once, and you get this real busy city feeling.
You can also see some people, it looks like they're jumping off the thing and diving into the water, if I'm seeing that correctly.
Like, that's what it looks like in the background there. They're having a little bit of a swim.
Nice. Yeah, and again, the different colors, just like some blue pillars going on in the background. The sense of depth is really fantastic in this one. Yeah. Card is
this could be in a history book. Like I wouldn't be surprised if I was turning through a textbook and I saw this.
Yeah, absolutely. Aaron, what's number 9?
So if you were to give me the challenge of pick a card that embodies Commander, that just says that represents what Commander is, I would have to name this card. And it's funny because it just came out within the last 6 months or so. So it's kind of surprising that it took us this long. And some people would say Rustic Study, but I would say my number 9, which is Apex Devastator. So Apex Devastator is 8 colorless and 2 green. It was printed in Commander Legends. It is a creature Chimera Hydra with 10 power and 10 toughness. And it's really simple. It just says Cascade 4 times. And so if you ask me, this is what Commander is all about. It is expensive. It is over the top. It's silly. You might hit some good things, but you might also just hit garbage. And it doesn't matter because the experience of just going Cascade, and doing it again and again and again. And you have the over the top art of Chimera Hydra, which is something the Simic would be proud of. And you just have this over the top, these lion things with heads and scales and this vast, countryside or this vast terrain. But just this card to me this is Commander in a nutshell. The experience, the fanfare, how ridiculous it is, all of that. This was
definitely on my short list because of, again, that this does everything I want to do in a Magic card. It's crazy. Recently, the Meatloaf songwriter James Steinman passed away, and he had an interesting interview because Meatloaf, big operatic, 9-minute songs or whatever, and they're like, James, why is everything so over the top? He says, if you don't go over the top, how do you get to the other side?
There we go.
I was like, that's just brilliant. I was like,
what a great quote.
What a fantastic. Yeah. So that was really awesome. And that's what I think of for this one.
And that's Apex Devastator. And also people just love to cascade. They love to spin the wheel. They love to pull the lever on the slot machine. What do we get? People love Maelstrom Wanderer and Yidris as commanders. And of course, Apex Devastator go into both of those decks. Cascade is a lovely... It just looks good on the card.
Yeah, on the foil extended art version, it looks amazing. It's just those 4 words.
It feels good in your heart when you read it. I love it.
And I think that's such a great... not like a rebound or anything, but Cascade, had this reputation. I love seeing design mistakes get sort of, revamped or get appreciated differently or, get reworked to the point where they don't have these. Because I remember, I've told the story before of being at Gen Con and having to play in one of the themed sealed events, and they were like, all cards have Cascade. And, Cascade used to be something that Wizards was kind of ashamed of, where they were like, we made a mistake, we're sorry. But to see them kind of embrace it and to see an audience embrace it really, really makes me happy.
Absolutely. So for my number 9 here, we're getting gross. It's time to get really gross. I look at this and I'm like scrolling. I'm looking. I'm like, oh, that's really disgusting. I was like, holy cow, you did an amazing job showing how disgusting carrion feeder can be. Yeah. Truly feeding on the carrion right in front of you with the teeth out, and the body is made of wet flesh and it's crazy looking. Carrion feeder is a black mana for a 1/1 uncommon zombie, originally from Scourge. It can't block, but you can sacrifice a creature and you put a +1/+1 counter on it. It was my number 1 zombie of all time, even though Ruben braided me for it at the time. I remember that. It's still a fantastic card.
Yeah, this is not the original art. Of course, Brian Snoddy did the original. This version is really gross. Not just the skinless flesh animal that is the carrion feeder, but the deflated skull that this thing has taken the brain from. I mean, it's very graphic.
Yep. And this was given to us in Modern Horizons. This was a card that was not Modern legal until very recently. And then, they gave it to us in Modern, and it was one of the reasons why Hogak became so powerful, because you would play this with your Bloodghast, you would play this with your Vengevines or whatever, and then you would sacrifice them to the Carrion Feeders, you'd make your bridge triggers, and it would just sort of spiral out of control from there. And so, if this is a hint of what we're going to get in Modern Horizons 2, I'm ready.
Here we go. I mean, this was the card of all the cards that taught Wizards, you can't just say sacrifice a creature : and expect something to not happen.
Well, and then they gave us Viscera eventually. There was a long time in Modern where we didn't have a 1-mana sack outlet, and then we had to settle, quote unquote, for Viscera, and then that's just good enough. As Sam Black has famously said, any card that says sacrifice a creature : it doesn't matter what the rest of the card says. You're going to be able to break it.
There you go. Let's move on here to number 8. Ruben, what's number 8?
It's really, I like that they've separated what a mammoth is from an elephant by sort of giving a little bouffant hairstyle to the mammoths. And the bouffant hairstyle on Thorn Mammoth is made of vines and grass.
Yeah.
It's very cute. And you zoom in, and again, every individual blade of grass, leaf on a bush, everything in the underbrush, and of course those piercing lime green eyes on Thorn Mammoth are what really stick out to me.
Yeah.
5 colorless green for a 6/6 elephant with trample from Throne of Eldraine. Whenever Thorn Mammoth or another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Thorn Mammoth fights up to one target creature you don't control. And just as Erin was saying that the card that she thinks of when you think of Commander, I kind of think of Brawl. When I think of Brawl, I think of Thorn Mammoth. This is like the top end card in a lot of the green decks.
Yeah, I play this card a lot on Arena, specifically for that reason. Like, it's huge. It fights whatever. If you can tutor it up, it just needs to enter the battlefield. You don't have to cast it or whatever. And the card itself is just like a gigantic, towering, scary looking elephant. Well, mammoth, because the boof. And it's going to crush from there.
Yeah, this was something I considered putting in my Vanifar deck as just a toolbox of, like, you can kind of pod for this. And so ETBs, it fights, and then everything I continue to pod for, because it says whenever another creature. And so if you're just doing the pod game, everything you pod for triggers this guy. And as long as he can kill them, I mean, this is just repeatable. Like, you'll take it.
Absolutely. All right. So, Aaron, what's your number 8?
Speaking of Cascade, this was another card that I thought I knew what it did until I saw what it did, and I still cannot believe what happened. My number 8 is the first Sliver. So the first Sliver has only been printed once in Modern Horizons. It is Wooburg, so 1 white, 1 blue, 1 black, 1 red, 1 green. Legendary creature Sliver, 7/7. It has Cascade, and then Sliver spells you cast have Cascade. So fun fact, the things you hit from Cascade, you are casting those. And so if you cast this, it resolves. And if you cascade into another Sliver, you keep going. And like, I didn't understand that until I actually played like a dedicated Sliver deck. And I was like, wait a minute, that's not how this works. And they were like, yes, it does. And they showed me the ruling, and oh my God, you just keep going and going.
So it's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
It's amazing.
Wow.
Now the first one, when you cast the first Sliver and then you cascade into a Sliver, that comes into play, and the first Sliver isn't in play yet. So you don't get it the turn you play it, but every turn thereafter, you go, Bone Splitter into flanking, into, two-headed, into Sidewinder or whatever. And Bob's your uncle. That thing is crazy.
Silly.
That's just amazing. It's almost, I guess what you would untap and basically guarantee that every mana cost below what you're about to cast a Sliver of, you're going to get. More or less.
I mean, if you flip over a 1, then
you failed. But
if you flip over a 4,
yeah,
then you're like, hey, let's spin the wheel again.
Absolutely.
Right? And I'm sure Frank Karsten's done the math on this. This has got to be somebody call Frank Karsten. But I bet you have like a 30% chance of hitting like 3 slivers a turn.
This is modern. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just saying, this is just Modern Horizon in its finest, giving us another, kind of Wooburg type Sliver, another Sliver Queen type character, and still having it be fresh and original.
Yeah. I mean, and of course, everyone's playing 42 lands in their commander decks, like Frank has told them to, right? I mean, it was so funny that was a controversy. It's like, how dare he? That was the other thing. How dare he tell us we put 42 lands in our decks?
I mean, I play more lands. I'm famous for playing too many lands in my decks because I just want to cast my spells.
Right.
I don't care. I would rather get flooded than screwed. And so I'm happy to play. I'm happy to say, Frank, I'm in the Church of Frank when it comes to lands.
I'd rather get screwed than flooded. That's why I'm #5kids. All right, let's go. Moving on. Moving on to number 8 from me. Whee! All right, how else to depict the entire everything being sucked into one well of everything? There's a door to nothingness.
I thought we just covered that.
I know, right? All the way in. Look, Door to Nothingness is a 5 generic mana spell originally from 5th Dawn. It's an artifact. It's a rare artifact that says it enters the battlefield tapped. You can pay double Wooburg. That's white, white, blue, blue, black, black, red, red, green, green, tap, sacrifice it. Target player loses the game.
Yep. And I love the original from Puddinhead that was in 5th Dawn, but this version is my favorite. The depth of the door that you get with the non-Euclidean geometry of like going into the dude's chest is something else. I love it.
Then this has become one of those cards that, you think of when you think of like Aliantrazi, or you think of the brewers like that. This is a card that most of us would look at and be like, ew, like this is hard. Like this is a lot of work. Like you're not going to do that. But the right people will look at this and be like, hold my beer. And I remember this was a thing in Standard for like a minute. Of just, there was a way to do this where you'd play this sort of bore you to tears control deck, with your Thragtusk, and you would line up all your pieces, and then whoop, it was a thing.
If I remember correctly, this was the first time they had ever printed target player loses the game. They done things like, you win the game or whatever, but they never said like that person over there is done. GG.
Right. They always wanted to remain positive, right? They always wanted to say, you win! Which, of course, in 2-player Magic means the other person lose, but, you got to look at the glass half full instead of half empty. This is kind of the first time they were like, no, you in particular, you lose.
Pack your crap up. Go home.
Yeah.
Number 7. Ruben, what's your number 7?
My number 7 is a preview card of ours from back in the day. And it when we saw the art to this, we were like, oh, no. We were like the art was what we responded to first when we got Tyrant Scorn.
Yeah.
Tyrant Scorn is an uncommon from War of the Spark for a blue and a black for an instant. Choose one. Destroy target creature with mana value 3 or less, or return target creature to its owner's hand. And this depicts the moment that Gideon first attempted to take on Nicol Bolas mano a mano with the Black Blade, and he was summarily dismissed. Initially with a bit of a backhand from Nicol Bolas.
And shattering the sword too, just like...
Yeah,
brutal.
what strikes me the most about this is the angle, because we had never really seen, to my knowledge, we hadn't seen a Bolas shot from kind of the ground up. It had always been just sort of a straight-on kind of camera, and so we really get to see the size of him, the length of him. You see the purple in the background, which tends to indicate you're dealing with the Dread Horde and all of that. You look at Command the Dread Horde, and that purple was very much there with Liliana and everything. And so you look at kind of the spinning vortex behind him, you look at the, the scale of Bolas, you see Gideon being reduced to Gideon falling, the way that he's portrayed, the blade being snapped. I mean, there's so much going on here, the colors and everything. And this was a moment that, felt very hopeless to look at, where you're like, well, if Gideon can't handle this and the Black Blade can't handle this, like, we're screwed.
Quote, the hero with the magic sword slays the dragon. Not this time.
Yeah, not this time.
Not this time.
Yeah, really powerful message in this piece of art. And this card, to this day, sees play in Historic. I mean, 2 mana, really versatile instant speed removal.
Yeah, it's was one of those things that kind of was indicative of War of the Spark, which is everything does everything at the best cost you've ever seen it. And you're like, okay, that's what we're dealing with. And it was fun. I mean, it was crazy good. All right, Aaron, what's number 7?
I will never forget where I was when my number 7 was previewed. I was at work. I was pulling a Reuben. I was looking at things I shouldn't be at work. And I was checking out Magic articles. And
why you gotta call me out like that? Jeez.
And so Gavin Verhey had this column at the time, and he previewed this card. And I wasn't around for the original Ravnica, so I did not get to appreciate Ghost Dad the first time around. But I was there for this one, and I will never forget it. My number 7 is Obzidad Ghost Council. So Obzidad is 1 colorless, 2 white, and 2 black, legendary creature Spirit Advisor with 5 power and 5 toughness. When Obzidad enters the battlefield, target opponent loses 2 life, and you gain 2 life. And at the beginning of your end step, you can exile Obzidad. Now remember, it's a May. There were so many times I'd forget to do this. And if you do, you return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. It gains haste. And so most of the removal at the time, or most of the good removal at the time, was sorcery speed. We didn't have a lot of good instant removal that really hit this. And so this was one of those cards where if it stuck, it could really just kind of take over a game. And so, to me, this is an amazing version of Obzidad. I love just the cast of characters here. The whole circle of the council here. You see Karlov in the back, very Casper-esque with the ectoplasm and everything. They just appear to be kind of silly in a way. Like they don't appear to be that serious, but just I've had a lot of good memories. Yeah, this was a good card in Standard. This was great against the control decks because they would run detention spheres, which didn't matter. And so you would just play this kind of agonizing game against them. And to my knowledge, this saw play all the way until rotation. And even in older formats, you could do dumb things with like Goryo's Vengeance. You could do dumb things with Whip of Erebos where you time everything correctly. And the Obzidad just kind of stays there once you cheat it into play. But beautiful art, fond memories of actually playing this card, and just my favorite Ghost Council.
Yeah. There are interesting things that you can do with that end of turn trigger with, as you mentioned, in Standard, Whip of Erebos was the big one where instead of it exiling to the whip, it exiles to itself and then will come back. You avoid your opponent's wraths, you avoid your opponent's detention spheres. It was just a lovely, lovely experience to have an active Obzidad cycle going. For when I had one. If my opponent had one, I was not a fan.
Yeah, it was really painful because you're like, I have this attention sphere and I need to disphere that.
Ultimate praise.
Just gotta hope my opponent forgets.
Yeah, like, hey, can I draw? You okay with oh,
Right.
Crap, he's going to exile. That sucks. Yeah, this card in and of itself was huge. I recall like sort of doubting this card. I was like, it's a lot of mana.
Yeah.
In terms of like, it's mana intensive. It's
White,
double black.
white, black.
It's a lot.
In this economy.
But like, as soon as it hit the board the first time I saw it, I was like, okay, this card's ridiculous. And you can't kill it with sorcery, whatever. And it's getting rid of, it got itself out of the removal that was played in the format the most, and
if
that
you
was
need
fantastic.
it to block, then you've got a 5/5 for 5.
Yeah, you didn't have to.
And most of the red removal wasn't going to deal it enough damage, so you were at least going to get 2 life out of it and a 2-for-1 usually. So.
All right. Well, this next card, there was Gate Crash. Well, this came all the way back in the previous second set of Ravnica, in Guild Pact. This card was one of my favorite cards. This card was originally spoiled incorrectly, which made everyone lose their minds at the time. And it's funny, actually. I was thinking today, I was like, man, there just are no spoilers from the new set that come out that aren't officially, sanctioned or whatever. And that's really good in many ways. Because back in the day, this creature was originally spoiled as a 4/3, and people were like, oh my god, there's no way you can have a trampling haste shroud creature that's a 4/3, and it turns out that Giant Solifuge was just a 4/1. But for what I lovingly called Captain Tickles for many years, this guy was great. Giant Solifuge is 2 Gruul mana, red and green, and 2 generic mana, so 4 mana total for a 4/1 rare insect. It has trample, haste, and shroud. Can be the target spells or abilities. So this card cleaned up in the Tron decks, as I recall, way back in the day, because you couldn't target it. And that was the big thing. It wasn't, they had all their removal in the world, but when you can't target it, you can't target it. So it went to mirrors.
I didn't know the history of this card. And I remember when we first started working together, I couldn't figure out, and then we had a preview card really early on that was like a red-green kind of thing. And I couldn't figure out where all the references were coming from. And I thought we were being trolled. And I was like, Evan, why do people keep bringing up this thing? And then you told me the story and I didn't realize the history behind it. But I just remember being so confused. Like, why are people showing us this? Why is this showing about our comments? And then you're inextricably bound.
This one, this new one that showed up out of Eternal Masters, just like the first one, it's a big old spider, it's coming at people, okay, cool. This next one, he has this kind of back thing on its back, and it's got all these sun rays that are going through it, and it's still terrifying. It's just really pretty and terrifying.
It's really it's a much weirder thing. And a Solifuge is the house of Solifuge, or the family of Solifuge, are not technically spiders. They are scorpions or sun spiders or camel spiders, sometimes as they're called, and they're super fast. And that's the most terrifying thing ever, is that if you ever see a video of basically a spider thing sprinting across a desert, that's a Solifuga. And boy, that's nightmare
really?
Fuel.
I've been saying that wrong for 15
I think it's
years.
I think it's, this is pronounced Solifuge. This card is Solifuge. Okay. But the scientific family is hard G, I'm pretty sure.
Gotcha.
Interesting.
But yeah, they're gross. And I don't.
And terrifying. Anything with that many legs is terrifying.
Yeah.
We want to hear to number 6. Ruben, what you got?
My number 6 is the only higher on somebody else's list.
Well, okay then. Aaron, what's your number 6?
So this is a card I love. We've talked about it many times on the show, but I don't think we've really talked about the art behind this. Multi-format All-Star was a huge part of Standard and Modern. The Phoenix deck specifically saw a little bit of play in Legacy, and people even tried it in Vintage to various degrees of success. But speaking of degrees, you definitely want high degrees so you can melt this thing. My number 6 is Thing in the Ice.
Nice.
So Thing in the Ice is 1 colorless and a blue. Is printed once in Shadows over Innistrad. It is a creature type horror with 0 power and 4 toughness and defender. Thing in the Ice enters battlefield with 4 ice counters on it. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, you remove an ice counter, and then if it has no counters on it, you transform it, where it turns into Awoken Horror. Svetlin did both sides of this. This is a Kraken horror with 7 power and 8 toughness, and when this creature transforms, you return all non-horror creatures back to their owner's hands. So this was a card that we all kind of saw potential in when it was first spoiled. When you see things like 4 instant sorceries, you think of things like Gataxian Probe, you think of Force of Will, and people immediately tried to break it, and it took a while for it to really find its footing. They tried it in Delver, it didn't really work, but once the Arclight Phoenix came out, then it was on, and then you were able to really Manamorphose this, and it was not hard to get this thing going, and this was really your plan B. If you couldn't do the Phoenix thing, or if they dealt with the Phoenixes, well, then you just have to deal with a 7/8 that can just bounce everything you have. And so there were also versions of this that were like very Death Shadowy, where you would play this with Praetor's Blessing and Mutagenic Growth and things like that. But this was a card that was just begging to be broken, and this was a horror trope of the literal Thing in the Ice. And a lot of theories behind this card. People thought it was Merit Lage at one point.
Right.
But just a really, really lovely card, and I love what Svetlin did with it.
I love the idea that they're towing it, like
Yeah.
they got to take it somewhere, and like because they took it somewhere, it probably melted so much that it exploded out of it, right?
Yeah,
that's cool.
And in particular, I mean, I love both sides of the art here, but in particular, I do love the Thing in the Ice art, where you've got they very carefully are towing this iceberg thing with a very fancy 2-master ship towards civilization, and oops, we accidentally a 7/8 that destroyed everything.
Yeah, it almost looks insectoid, like it almost looks like a carapace on it, and then you have the giant pinchers and what appear to be maybe wings on the back. Like, this thing is terrifying.
It looks a little bit like a D&D monster called a Remoraz, which is an ice monster that has like a boiling hot maw interior that keeps it warm because it's an insectoid, and so that's what it kind of looks like to me.
And I like the difference in the sunshine. When you're looking at the towing version, this appears to be a very beautiful day. You have some birds in the distance, and then when you flip it over, it does appear to be darker, like maybe you're looking at sunset. So that's a really neat difference as well. The sky is much darker here.
Well, speaking of something that's much lighter, this card spoke to me a lot because of how sort of bright it was, how much it was different than the images around it. I think in particular, the Kaladesh block was amazing for Svetlin because like the way he was able to make the artwork, the metal, and the metal shiny, and here comes the different light sources that would glow through the glass, and how that would interact with the little gears, and like all that stuff looked absolutely amazing. And one of the ways you can really see that is in the card Fumigate. And the card Fumigate, it's sort of bright and airy in many ways. It's kind of got that white cloud down there, but it's got that Thopter in the sky that has all the sunlight going through it. It's got the gremlins down below to kind of show you this kind of the terror that you're creating essentially. But at the same time, it all works together with the word Fumigate, the action that you're doing. Like, it looks super cool, and like you're just trying to get rid of this pests that are all over Kaladesh. Like, get out of here.
Yeah.
It's quite joyful for the act of fumigating. You look at, just like you said, the sunlight, the clouds. This is otherwise a beautiful setting. You could have easily made this dark, and it's still, just like you said, it still ties in with Kaladesh, because Kaladesh was meant to be a palate cleanser. We were coming off of Shadows over Innistrad. We were coming off of sort of Eldrazi Fever, where we went straight from Battle for Zendikar into Shadows over Innistrad, and then they were like, we need to give you something light, where the theme of the plane, or the story of the plane, was basically a science fair that went wrong.
Fair.
And so, so I mean, this was fine. I mean, it tied in very well and was a decent card as well. This was the card that would get you to the mid game, where you would destroy everything and you'd keep going. And I love just the little eye of the gremlin
Blinking, yeah.
Yeah, for those who don't know, it's 2 white, 3 generic mana for a rare sorcery that destroys all creatures. You gain 1 life for each creature destroyed this way. So you pay that 1 extra mana, but again, as the control deck, you want to gain that
Give
4
you a
or
little
5
bit of a
life
buff too, yeah.
to get you back into it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was great. Card is fantastic, and I love it. Let's move on here to number 5. This is the first of my 2 hires in a row. So I'll see you guys at number 3. Ruben, what's number 5?
I'm so glad I get to go next because there was an overarching story that we were telling at the Inventors Fair. Tezzeret was there looking at the inventions and looking for inspiration and getting the Planner Bridge as part of that story arc. And keep that in the back of your mind. You know, that was like the Marvel post-credits teaser for that block. A couple sets later, we're doing some other stuff in Amonkhet. A couple sets later, we're doing stuff in Ixalan. And the story of Ixalan is about the Immortal Sun. And the Immortal Sun is this ancient, powerful artifact that somehow has a connection to the plane of Ravnica, because Azor brought it there. Well, how are we going to get that to where I need it to be? I need to bring that to Ravnica so that we can lock all the planeswalkers in place and have the battle royale. And the way that we do that is with the Planner Bridge on the card Masterminds Acquisition. Masterminds Acquisition is 2 colorless black for a sorcery where you choose one. Either you search your library for a card and put it into your hand, then shuffle, or you put a card you own from outside of the game into your hand. Here we see one of Nicol Bolas's lieutenants, Vraska, in pirate form, overseeing the acquisition of the Immortal Sun, being pulled into a different plane of existence through the magic of that bluish planar bridge in I think that this is in Orazka. Is that right?
I think that's right. Yeah.
Or Hadanta. Hadanta is where is the peak of the mountain where this was housed, I think. Yeah.
And this is, sorry. Oh, no, I was just going to say, it's interesting to see cards like this and to see where we are now with lessons and learn, because, you know, you can see them kind of flirting with this idea of playing with the Exile Zone and playing with the sideboard. You know, we had the card that let you tutored for an Eldrazi that was outside of the game, and then you had this, you know, the sets are pretty close to each other, and now we have it, and then, you know, you have the companions now, and then you look at this, and so it's neat to see how we got here to where it's just fine to be doing this, and, you know, you wouldn't blink an eye or you wouldn't bat an eyelash to think of getting something from your sideboard or getting something from Exile. You can just kind of do that now quite comfortably.
Yeah. This is like the most Ollie on Trazi card that's ever Ollie on Trazi. He played this thing from like day one until it left us, because it could just go do all the weird things he was wanting to do exactly when you needed to do it.
God bless him.
And the planar bridge is cool because it can't transport like flesh, as I understand it, just metal. So you could put the Immortal Sun through that thing.
The Lazotep zombies could transport through it because they were made of metal.
It affected Vorinclex too. They said that when Vorinclex showed up on Kaldheim, he'd lost all of his organic bits, that he'd just been really kind of withered down. And I think the only way he got them back was he like melded with a deer or something. And,
oh my God.
Yeah.
As you do.
As you do.
You know, when you're in the forest and you went through a magical planar bridge.
If he'd gone to Eldraine, he would have just been turned into an elk.
Nice.
That's fair.
Nice. Aaron, what's number 5?
My number 5 is a card that I will never cast. I will never. We say that now.
You say that now.
3 years. I'm playing Goblins now, for God's sakes.
Goblins.
This is a card I would probably never cast. I don't understand this lifestyle. I don't understand your lifestyle. But there are people that love this card. They will play it in any format if they can. It's seen play in Modern, Legacy, and Vintage. I think it won the last week's Legacy Challenge in Blue-White Humans.
Oh, sure.
I don't understand, but I see you and you are valid. My number 5 is Champion of the Parish. So Champion of the Parish is 1 white. It was printed in Innistrad. It's a creature human soldier with 1 power, 1 toughness. Whenever another human enters the battlefield under your control, you put a +1/+1 counter on Champion of the Parish. So there are people that want nothing more than to play this on turn 1. Like, that is it for them in the good times department. And humans is a thing in every format right now. Humans gets better with every human that gets printed. And this card gets out of control very, very quickly. You know, every token, either vial activations, you know, and the art in general is very beautiful as well. You know, you have this sort of, kind of reminds me of this Paul Revere kind of character with like the folded hat, and the armor. You see the door in the background that appears to have the Avacyn symbol on it. And this is just what people want to be doing. And it's just a really simple card. This is the epitome of like a tribal strategy. And it just gets really silly after a while how big this thing can get, where you need to deal with it.
This card was effectively my number 11. Nice. This card was so close to my list This and Stern Protector, which is another Svetlin Velinov card from Innistrad, very similar motif, kind of dark in the woods, but hopeful with the big leather-bound armor, like this huge shoulder plate, the giant Zweihander sword, the tricorn hat, like all of everything that's happening is such good costume inspiration. Giant, F-off belt buckle in the middle. Like, I love, and it's another piece that you need to zoom in and see the background houses and see the spiked top of the wall. It's so good.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things where, and I think Rosewater gets this quote, which is, whatever card Magic you hate the most is the reason that someone is playing the game. Like, they live for nothing than turn one champion of the Parish. That's what they live for. Yep. And that's okay, All right. Don't have number 5. I don't have number 4. So Ruben, what is your number 4?
My number 4, I had it number 3 briefly because it makes 3 goat tokens, but I bumped it down a little bit. But talk about gross. I mean, you look at Clackbridge Troll and you're just like, geez,
wow,
I am uncomfortable with the shape of this thing's skull, the position that it's in, but again, it's kind of like light and fun. And the sun is shining. The bridge is picturesque. These goats are about to get eaten, but they're having a good time while doing it. Clackbridge Troll is 3 colorless black for an 8/8 troll with trample and haste. When it enters the battlefield, target opponent creates 3/01 white goat creature tokens. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, any opponent may sacrifice a creature. If a player does, tap Clackbridge Troll, you gain 3 life, and you draw a card.
I love this.
Yeah, I love this so much.
Yeah, it's the epitome of the troll under the bridge. Eldraine gave us a lot of fairy tale motifs, and it also kind of has this desecration demon aspect to it. But I'm sorry, if you're a Clackbridge Troll and you are watching, you are beautiful. You do not have to live up to society's beauty standards. I just want you to know that. I think this card is delightful. Like you said, I love the 3 goats. You can see the 3rd goat more towards the background. You have the very obvious bridge there that's made up of cobblestone, the beautiful sunny day, and the troll that's just like, can I have a taste? Like, I love this so much.
The troll is just like, what delicacy should I choose for myself today?
Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta be careful, you'll get the clack back, you know what I'm saying?
Wow. I can see this in like a Turgrid deck where like you kind of want them to sacrifice things so that you get them. Like, this is very, very niche, but I think in the right deck, in the right EDH deck, this could be a lot of fun.
What's the new white 2-drop that makes you pay 2 for a triggered ability? Is a combo with this card?
Protector?
Strict Proctor. Yeah, that card is fantastic with this. You can just be like, no, I'm not making the tokens.
Here's an 8/8 trample haste for free.
Wow, that's a neat little interaction.
Like
Isn't that fun? All right, Aaron, what's number 4?
So as I've mentioned, I've been playing a lot of goblins lately.
Svetlin's got some great goblins.
He has some really, really good goblins. And I was thinking of putting Crater Maker on this list because I've been playing a lot with Crater Maker lately. But my number 4 had to be this card, which was an iconic card in Standard, was an amazing card in Standard, and continues to see play. The modern decks sometimes play it in Jund, which is like, what? But it does have that Haymaker aspect where you need to deal with this card. Otherwise, it's just going to take over the game. It obviously sees play in Legacy, not in actual goblins, but in the mono red Stompy list, because sometimes just a turn 1 Goblin Rabblemaster can end the game. So Goblin Rabblemaster is 2 colorless and a red. It is a Goblin Warrior from Magic 2015. It has 2 power, 2 toughness. Other Goblin creatures you control attack each turn if able. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you create a 1/1 red Goblin creature token with haste, and whenever Goblin Rabblemaster attacks, it gets +1/+0 until end of turn for each other attacking Goblin. And so this card is amazing. Like I said, it sees play in the mono red Stompy decks because there are just some decks that can't deal with a turn 1 Goblin Rabblemaster, or you will kind of feather your nest with a Chalice of the Void on 1, a Trinisphere, and then when your opponent is already tied down, you play Rabblemaster to close out the game. And so the art is just amazing by Svetlin Velinov. You have the Goblin that is very clearly in the foreground, the little Goblin nose, which I just love, and then you see all of the Goblins in the background. Like, this background is just a feast of details here.
It's so good.
You see the different kinds of Goblins that it is summoning, that it is mobilizing, and just a very, very good card with multi-format impact to this day.
Yeah, the sense of
Here's
enthusiasm.
a closer version in case y'all wanted to see it, just that you can taste each individual goblin, and they're all so doofy.
Yes!
Like, they're all just so absurd. And then the rabblemaster themselves, you got like the stapled helmet to his head.
Bolted on.
It's
Absolutely.
fun and menacing at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. This card, I think, if I recall correctly, it's like a 4-turn clock if you don't answer it. Like, if you do absolutely nothing.
Like the first turn, it's 1 damage.
Right.
Then the next turn, it's
6 damage.
Then the next turn, it's a lot more.
A lot more. We've entered math mode. It's okay. The point is, this card is
168. Yeah, it's 168, I think.
168, you're dead. Got it. But Rabblemaster in and of itself, just being a fantastic, aggressive red creature. Like, when M15 finally showed up, it was like, whoa, this is great. There's no downside here. This is all upside. And before you know it, it's in an older formats because, again, unchecked, this thing just takes off. Just absolutely ridiculous.
And can be misleading. Like, I think some people looked at this and thought you had to be a goblin deck, but like, you can play this in anything, and it's just an army in a can.
Absolutely. So let's move on here to number 3. I have one.
Hey.
Yay. This card is sweet. I was not expecting this card to jump out at me the way that it did. You know, I'm blind and I'm like, whoa. He did that? He did what? I wasn't prepared for that because this is a different take on a classic cycle of cards that have been around a long time. And Wizards at one point would start putting like these cards at a very high rarity when they shouldn't because they're not worth it. But it's okay, because with Iconic Masters, they finally reprinted the Legendary Dragons, but they put them back at rare where they should be.
Oh.
And Svetlin did Kaiga, or Kaiga?
Yeah, Kiga.
Kiga, the Tide Star. It's a blue and 5 generic mana for a 5/5 Legendary Dragon Spirit. It's a rare, originally from Champions of Kamigawa. It has flying, and when it dies, you gain control of target creature. And this art is incredible. The way it flows through the air, it's got those the way that glowing light around itself is sort of working. A background, you got those waterfalls, those awesome little, outlets or whatever that's falling through. This card is fantastic.
I love the ripple effect. Like, when you look at the body, you can see like these sort of twisting, kind of blowing in the wind. I'm not sure where I'm looking for here, but these flourishes that are just obviously, it's really something I get kind of lost in whenever I look at this. You have the beautiful sky in the background. You have the waterfalls, but then you also have the water coming out of the other things that are clearly from Kamigawa. And just a really great take on this dragon.
Yeah. The wings that you have on the style of this dragon are so different and more endemic to Asian mythology. They look a lot more eel-like, a lot more. There's animals that live in the water, and dragons of Asian, Chinese, Japanese, Korean mythology tend to be water dragons. And this is much more in line with that styling, and it's super cool.
Yeah, if you could look at the original Champions of Kamigawa version that was made by Itoku, I believe it was.
Yeah,
and you can really see that kind of the sort of the wave on the body thing, and how when you kind of turn it around and give it a different sort of perspective, it can look just like they did in their own Iconic Masters. So that was really sweet. Ruben, what's number 3?
My number 3 is another card that I feel like is going to get overlooked. Not only is it a non-basic land, but it's part of a cycle. Not only is it part of a cycle, but it's a common. Not only is it a common, but it's one of 2 versions of it that were in Guild Gatecrash. My number 3 is Simic Guildgate. This Simic Guildgate is absolutely gorgeous. Originally from Gatecrash, has the Simic set symbol on it. It's a common, and then enters the battlefield tapped, and it taps for a green or a blue, and it's a land N-gate. But you look at this version and you zoom into it, and this is telling a big part of when merfolk were rediscovered. They had been living in an underwater, sort of undiscovered portion of the world of Ravnica, and the dwarves, they delved too greedily and too deep, and then they uncovered lo and behold, turns out there's merfolk on Ravnica, and now you've got this entryway that is very mer themed with the symbol of the Simic in the center, but you've got lots of the combination of water and wood together, and it's just gorgeous.
Yeah, with like the moss that's kind of growing on it. You see like the 2 sort of soldiers, the protectors, with their arms holding like these axe type things there in the middle, like the little glowing orbs that was there for the Simic when they were used with +1/+1 counters and stuff. And then the 2 dragons like mouths that the water's falling out of. Like that's incredible.
Yeah.
I like it. And it's crazy. I thought you were talking about the Dragon's Maze one, which is just as incredible. I was like, God.
That's what I was looking at too. And then, like, as he's describing it, I'm like, wait a minute, this doesn't sync up. Then I'm like, oh, he must be looking at a different version because they've done so many versions of these.
Right. Yeah. And he himself did it. And I was like, you
Yeah.
could choose either one of those. And I'm like, wow.
I do love the Simic Guildgate from Dragon's Maze as well. It is a lot more in line with or more. It's also. It has
zoomed out,
the
right?
Same image.
Yeah.
It has the same gate in the center. It's just zoomed out.
I get Temple of Enlightenment vibes from that version, the very bustling, which isn't very Simic. You know, when you think of Simic, the one you picked is very Simic, you know, with the creepy lights and the water and everything and the kind of haunted house feel. But the other one is such a far cry from Simic because it is very civilization and buildings and people and fountains and things like that. But they're both fabulous.
Yeah, it's the one where it's pulled back. It's like, I'm gonna go to the store to get a +1/+1 counter. Do you need anything?
Right.
I'll be right back. You know,
you've got a little shop in the lower left there.
Yeah,
you've got some. This is like too many straight lines for me, right? Like this is very clearly in Ravnica, though, right?
Oh yeah.
Like you've got a Ravnica street, and then just off the Ravnica street, now we're getting some curves. Now we're getting some weird angles, and that's where you go into the Simic Funhouse.
Absolutely. Aaron, what's your number 3?
So my number 3 is a card that was recently released within the last year or two and was good enough to go all the way up to vintage in the Oath of Druids decks. So for those who don't know, Oath of Druids relies on oathing or cheating into various creatures, and the power level of those creatures has to be amazing. Usually it's Grizzlebrand. There are some exceptions to where you'll get like a Blazing Archon, or you'll get an Inferno Titan or something like that. So for this card to be good enough to be an Oath target really speaks to its power level. It saw a little bit of play in Standard as well. My number 3 is Niv Mizzet Perrin. So Niv Mizzet Perrin was printed in Guilds of Ravnica. It is 3 blue and 3 red for a 5/5 dragon wizard with flying that can't be countered. And then whenever you draw a card, Niv Mizzet Perrin deals 1 damage to any target. And whenever a player casts an instant or sorcery spell, you draw a card. So this is an engine, in and of itself that you are often fine oathing into. And then you can just kill your opponent with things like your brainstorms, your ponders, your ancestral recalls, your treasure cruises, or even just playing magic. You know, the oath deck tends to be more of a control deck, so you have a lot of instants and sorceries. And you draw a card, which then triggers this. And so this card just takes over games by itself. I have lost to this card. I love the fresh take on Niv Mizzet. When you look at the last 2 versions, which were the Fire Mine and the Draco Genius, those were both done by Todd Lockwood. And in both cases, the colors tend to be very subdued. You have the Fire Mine, which does have the red and blues of Izzet, and you also have sort of the glowing gold, which you also see in the Draco Genius. But these versions, when you look at the backgrounds, they're very, in my opinion, subdued. But when you look at Perrin, all bets are off. Like, you really see kind of the Izzet, the sparkiness, the lightning rods behind it. You see kind of the more steampunky take behind it, and Niv Mizzet just very confidently just being like, what's up? And I just love this take on the card, and just for it to be good enough to get all the way to the top really says something.
Yeah.
This was my number 5, because that grin is like legendary. I don't know if you could be more smug. Like, they were like, can you make him as smug as possible? And he's like, got you, fam.
Can you make a dragon smug? Right? Like the other versions of Niv Mizzet are spectacular and great, but they really lean into the dragon side. I feel like you get the dragon wizard here, right? You get that attitude. You get that I know something you don't know kind of,
And why should I help you?
Exactly.
Someone who's
canonically, Niv Mizzet is self-aware to the point that Niv Mizzet is aware that he is a character in a card game.
Are you serious?
Canonically, he is aware that he is a character in a story.
I didn't know that.
That's amazing.
It's like, you can't have anybody smarter. You can't have anybody who's more aware. And that's what you're seeing with that
smart, and he knows it. That's that grin. I absolutely love it. All right, let's move on here to number 2. Ruben, what's number 2?
My number 2 is the 6th card that begins with the letter T on my list, although it's cheating a little bit because it begins with the word the. I'm a huge nerd when it comes to like Dungeons and Dragons stuff, and one thing that I love about D&D are the flavor that they give to the oozes. And things like gray oozes and black puddings and gelatinous cubes, and I get huge D&D ooze vibes from the Mimeoplasm.
Oh, yeah.
The Mimeoplasm is a legendary creature ooze, originally from Commander 2011, for 2 colorless black, green, blue. The thing is a 0/0. Don't know what their pronouns are. The Mimeoplasm enters the battlefield. You may exile 2 creature cards from graveyards. If you do, it enters the battlefield as a copy of one of those cards, with a number of additional +1/+1 counters on it equal to the power of the other card.
Yeah.
So, the combo here is you go get like a Triskelion, or, something like, or a Walking Ballista, and then you get a Lord of Extinction, or something else that's just a massive amount of power in your graveyard.
Yeah, this card is awesome. Go ahead.
This card used to be the Sultai Commander du jour for a really, really long time, which makes sense because it was in Commander 2011. And it's interesting how it's really been kind of replaced by cards like Muldrotha. But this was really the first one where if you wanted to do Sultai broken things, this was the road you went down.
Yeah, I mean, this really kicked off they're making a Commander product for Commander players. And back in 2011, that was weird. That was unseen. What do you mean? Like, why are you referring to all these players? And why are we having these giganto effects that we would never be okay with in Standards? Because in Commander, things are different. And you get to have crazy... I had this giant foil on my desk for years.
Yeah.
It was awesome. Aaron, what's number 2?
So my number 2, we mentioned cards being good enough for older formats, and this card was very much a dog whistle for older formats. When you see things that say converted mana cost 3 or less, that usually means that they're going to see play in older formats, because in older formats, you tend to like your cards to be very cheap. Anything 4 or greater better be really, really good to see play in older formats, and so this card really changed the game. My number 2 is Abrupt Decay. So Abrupt Decay is black and green, return to Ravnica. It's an instant. Abrupt Decay can't be countered, and it also says destroy target non-land permanent with converted mana cost 3 or less. So this was a card that not only cried out for older formats, but also really changed the game and really established Golgari as being the combination of that just can destroy anything. And we ended up seeing a much better version of this, you could say, in Assassin's Trophy. And then we saw this with Casualties of War. And this was really the one that kind of started it all for me, of whatever it is, 3 mana or less, just get rid of it. And so you have what appears to be a Nivik Cyclops here that is being overtaken by mushrooms and fungi and is literally just kind of degrading in front of you. And so just an amazing card that I just remember when it was first previewed, of just, it doesn't matter, just get rid of it.
My jaw hit the floor when I read this one back in the day. I was like, well, we have our new legacy staple, because that's the format that wants this the most.
Yeah.
And also, this was while Counterbalance Top was still a thing in Legacy. And this was just a hard answer to it in green-black, which was kind of unheard of. So it was just absolutely perfect timing.
The Jund decks loved it in Modern because they tend to play a very diverse removal suite to deal with everything. There have been times where Bug has been the flavor du jour in Legacy. The Maverick decks loved it. I think even some of the Storm decks were running this for a while. Dredge ran this for a while, just because it was a way to absolutely deal with whatever was bothering you, and just a great combination of words.
Sorry, go ahead.
That little detail with the hoses at the top and they're blowing the gas out is so cool. It's so small, but I love that.
Yeah.
If you are someone who enjoys being quickly overrun by mushrooms, and that is like your aesthetic, like if you're a house witch, there's a book called Fungi of the Far Realms.
Oh, geez.
That describes over 200 fantastical fantasy mushrooms. And it's an illustrated book. I highly recommend that. And that's what this reminds me of when I was looking at it.
Nice. Well, for my number 2, it's hard to make something that I would often describe as sort of majestic. That to take something sort of normal or average, or even something that's above average, and make it just be like, oh, and like scrolling through, and I was just like, oh my god, that's so majestic. Have you seen his promo Judge Spellskite? It's amazing. Behind it is this blue light. Spellskite's right there in the middle of it, and it's like, it's really this sweet, it's really focused on Spellskite itself, and you can see every little ridge that's in Spellskite as the creature. Spellskite showed up in New Phyrexia for 2 generic mana. It's an 0/4 artifact creature horror, originally a rare, still a rare, for a Phyrexian blue mana, which which can be paid with your blue or 2 life, you can change a target spell or ability to Spellskite. And this was a very special version they made for judges, and wow, it looks amazing. And they also, I don't think they only reused it on the Magic Online promo, so that's the only way you can get it.
And such a reverse, too. When you look at Spellskite, the orb is on the bottom, and this one is on the top. And so a very nice inverse there, and also just a stark difference of, the original Spellskite is very steely, like the blue is very faded, like it's not a very powerful blue. This one is unmistakably blue, like just a very eerie, otherworldly blue, gorgeous card.
It's almost
also,
like gray in the
noticed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know if you know this, but there's a dragon in the background back there. Little peeking in, trying to breathe fire, but getting it all redirected to the Spellskite. Right? It's tough to even see. This is another thing. It's like Svetlin has, you can print 1 million copies of this Spellskite, and I don't think that you would, it would take a while before you even notice that there's other characters in this art.
I didn't know that. Poor Svetlin. Like, we deserve to see your things. Like, show us.
And that's what you'll find a lot of times when you go to the artist booths, if and when we get events back.
Big art prints, yeah.
Huge art prints. You're like, oh my God, I didn't know it was X and Y and Z and that thing and this thing. And there's a so-and-so in the tree over there. Like, you just had no idea. That's awesome. All right. It's time to go to number 1. Ruben, what's your number 1?
My number 1 is one of the most highly played cards in Commander. It's one of the most sought-after effects in Commander, so much so that when this card was printed in Magic 2012, people were like, hey, we finally get another Lightning Greaves in Swiftfoot Boots.
Wow.
Swiftfoot Boots is 2 colorless mana for a equipment. Equipped creature has hexproof and haste, and it equips for a colorless. The movement, the fun, the excitement of the boots. You see the flames coming off the boots, but it's like they're part of the boot, really. And I just love the you can feel the speed. As the other leg is like fading into the background. This is part of what makes Svetlin being a fully digital artist so special, is that he really can capture movement and light, and it's just a great little piece.
Yeah, and there's something about that arm placement right there that just says they're really getting it. Like, they're really at it with that arm right there.
That's right.
Absolutely fantastic.
Full bore.
Yeah.
And is a great, piece of equipment for any deck. It's worth $2 no matter how many times they print it.
Yeah, this is a budget version of Lightning Greaves. We've talked about how Commander is getting to be quite expensive. And so if you can't afford Lightning Greaves, because that still goes for $3 to $6, you can probably afford a Swiftfoot Boots. And we saw something similar to this. He did the Burning Sun's avatar in Ixalan. And you kind of see the same thing of the dinosaur obviously moving very quickly, and the way that he portrays the charging aspect, where the head is very, very close to you and then the body kind of gets smaller. That's really, really cool.
That was actually close to my list. I remember in particular, I was like, wow, that dragon or that dinosaur looks awesome.
Yeah.
But regardless.
Coming right at you.
Yeah, this card is sweet. So for Lightning Greaves, it was 2 mana, 0 to equip, and this is 2 mana, 1 to equip. Still good.
And this one gives you hexproof instead of shroud, so you can equip other equipment to it.
Right.
There's a couple differences, but
yeah, a couple important differences. Aaron, what's your number 1 and my number 4?
This was a tough one. I thought about making Abrupt Decay my number 1, but I just felt like this card has continued to persevere in a way that Abrupt Decay hasn't. And while Abrupt Decay certainly had an impact on the game in terms of the type of removal that it was and what it did for Golgari and things like that, I still feel like this number 1 just changed the game a little bit more. Before Battle for Zendikar and Oath of the Gatewatch, I think we always thought of Eldrazi in terms of battle cruisers. We certainly had Eldrazi at lower mana cost, but I don't think any really made the impact the way that Ulamog and Kozilek did and all of those, and Emrakul. And then Oath of the Gatewatch and Battle for Zendikar came along, and the curve kind of lowered a little bit, and we saw Eldrazi in a really aggressive light. We were given Eldrazi Mimic, we were given Endless One, and if you're going to have an aggressive tribal deck, you need some form of disruption. Your Kite Sail freebooter, if you will, because otherwise they're just going to play a board wipe and laugh at you. But when you play this card was the perfect combination of disruption and aggression that sees play. Vintage Eldrazi is still very much a thing. Vintage Taxes is a thing. Legacy Eldrazi will always see play. Modern Eldrazi still continue to see play even after the, Eye of Ugin banning. And just a format defining card, and just a creepy card too when you look at the art. My number 1 and your number 4 is Thought-Knot Seer.
And my number 6.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sick. Thought-Knot Seer is 3 generic mana and 1 colorless mana. Yes, the Wingding itself.
That's right.
When it enters the battlefield, target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-land card from it and exile that card. When it leaves the battlefield, target opponent draws a card. And it's
On a
it's a rare
4/4.
Eldrazi.
4/4 for 4. You can
Jesus.
play it on turn 2 with Eye of Ugin and Eldrazi Temple. And it does the Skyclave Apparition thing of it takes away your best thing, and then when it comes back, you don't get the best thing back. You get a replacement. You get to draw a card, which is nice, but you don't get the best thing back. And the Thought-Knot Seer was like the thing that held this deck together. You wanted to have your, Eldrazi Mimic or whatever, 2 mana Endless one on turn 1. You wanted to have your turn 3 Reality Smasher. But this was pressure. This was disruption. This was everything you could possibly want in a creature.
And this art is ridiculous. This is another one of those cards and you can see the frame is kind of transparent, but go look at the art print. It has these spindly little legs, and then it has the way the pinchers go, and that eye just kind of staring at you, the way that it's sort of framed in this muck, like you look at kind of the dripping rainbowness that's coming out of it, the head portion of it. This is a weird take on Eldrazi, and still very cool and very terrifying, and just an incredible card.
You look at the eyeball thing, and like if you ever wanted to really make some nightmare fuel, animating this image to have the eyeball like jaunting around, absolutely horrific, man. I don't need that in my life. Oh my god. Well, for my number one, I love it when artists these days get to paint 2 paintings. Because we're putting cards on the front and the back, so now you get to have 2. So not only do I like the front painting, I love the back painting too. So you get to have both of them together, the chocolate and the peanut butter, because he made the giant character to come out of M19 what they needed to have work and be exciting and be impressive and be awesome is Nicol Bolas, the Ravager. The Ravager is a red, black, blue, and generic mana for a mythic legendary elder dragon from M19. It's a 4/4 with flying, and when it enters the battlefield, each opponent discards a card. However, you can pay 4 generic mana, red, black, and blue, to exile it and return to the battlefield transformed only as a sorcery into Nicol Bolas the Arisen. Goodness gracious, it's a legendary planeswalker Bolas. It has 7 loyalty, and it has +2 draw 2 cards. -3, it deals 10 damage to target creature or player. -4, you put target creature or planeswalker card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. And -12, exile all but the bottom card of target player's library. Fantastic.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I don't think this card really made a splash in Standard, but it's still a $30 card, so the Commander players must be loving this, because you can just make a Nicol Bolas deck, and I faced it, and it's not fun.
It's a rough deck to try to face down. I mean, it's a 4/4 flyer for 4 that has an effect when it comes into play. And I remember being in the room when this was first previewed at Grand Prix Seattle. And they were showing off the Two-Face cards, or they were showing off some amount of planeswalkers, not Two-Face cards, and then they showed us Nicol Bolas, and it was like, whoa, that is a lot. And in particular, the art on the front, I think, is my favorite of these. You've got crazy depth with the stream and the river in the background with the waterfalls, but you've also got a really unique breath weapon given to Nicol Bolas. You've got a little bit of the spines or feathers that you've got going down, and the claws, and you feel the power even though it's a live, young version of Nicol Bolas.
Yeah, I was just about to say that previously, we'd always sort of seen Nicol Bolas in all of his glory. And, when you're doing these sort of origins type cards, the flip side has to be kind of the, dare I say, weaker version of this. You have Liliana and her little healer's clothes just sort of throwing breadcrumbs, and you have baby Chandra and everything. And so, they did a good job of making Nicol Bolas smaller and still powerful, and really giving you that wow factor of when you do flip it over, this is Bolas. And so I love particularly the sky behind Nicol Bolas Arisen is very ominous and very terrifying. I love the hands there sort of giving you the kind of come at me look, and just a powerful card. It's a shame it didn't do more in Standard, but Standard I think was just so broken at that time where this wasn't good enough for Standard.
It wasn't.
A tower gargoyle that immediately ravenous rats you that can also turn into a.
It should have been.
It should have. I recall playing against it a little bit, but it never really took off. The mana requirements were tough or whatever. But the scariest thing ever is to see Nicol Bolas the Ravager and they have 6 mana, and you're like, oh my god, 1 more mana and I die forever. And that's how it works. And that is our top 10 Svetlin Velinov cards. You'll see them on screen right now for your review. Take a look at my list, Aaron's list, for Ruben's top 10, and we want to hear from you about what card we did not talk about, and we'll select our favorite to win a $50 gift certificate to CoolStuffInc.com. But before we go, I want to thank my co-host. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Ruben.
Thank you. And more than any other artist, but I would encourage you to go and look at all of the close-ups of all of the Magic artists that we've talked about. But in particular, I found that Svetlin Velinov, if you look at the detail, you pick up so much more. And I think that collecting art prints of Magic artists is something that, people, it's a hobby for people.
Yeah, people do.
But it might be something that you could look into.
Yeah, you can go to artstation.com/Velinov, and this is all of his stuff. Keep scrolling. It's a long and illustrious portfolio.
And I will add one bonus Velinov piece is a piece that he did while I was at Star City Games. Right? There was a playmat that Svetlin did with the Jace equivalent character reading a book and a bunch of goblins getting electrocuted next to him.
Yeah, this was a long time ago.
That was a long time ago.
Goodness
It was 2012, 2013.
Something like
and
that.
I remember that one because I looked at that piece and was like, what is the story behind this character that Svetlin just kind of invented?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was really fantastic. If you get to track that down, you should.
He's kind of a young guy, too. There's also an interview with him on YouTube and just looks nothing like I imagined, but it's not in a bad way. Like, I don't know why I imagine him being older, and he looks like he's our age.
That's okay, too. As we move here to our final slide, I want to thank our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com, our co-sponsors, CardHoarder.com and AlterSleeves.com, my co-host, Aaron Campbell and Ruben Bressler. You guys for watching and listening. I hope you support us at Patreon.com/MagicMics. Please follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe to everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online at Twitch.tv at Magic Mics, on Twitter at Magic Mics Cast, our Magic Mics subreddit, and like the Magic Mics page on Facebook. Or join us here next week, same time, same place, for another episode of Magic Mics. Good night, everybody.